Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the first live stream I've done in August.
You
Let me
got to
just
get
make
off
a
the
little.
road, man.
I know, no, 3 weeks on the road has been well, pretty much most of July is all gone. So let me just. There we are, making sure we're on all the other platforms, making sure the streams are up and running. They look like it, although the Twitter one is interesting. But anywho, so hey everybody, really excited to be with our good friend Adam from Humanize IT. Adam, take a second, tell us who you are, what you do, all the fun things.
Yeah, my name's Adam Walter. I used to be a director of security / CIO in the corporate world, and I founded a company when I did my own CIO work back in 2017. We did so well that we bought a gap analysis software and turned it into our QBR software that I use to help MSPs talk to their clients. We are very simple. We're almost pretty much just a turnkey. You sign up and you've got a QBR ready to go that has all of your data empowered by your PSA and a great tool called Compliance Scorecard.
Well, thanks for the plug there. Awesome. Suppose I should do my own as well, right? So, hey, good afternoon, everybody. Tim Golden, founder and CEO of Compliance Scorecard, where we help you have the risk conversation with your customers alongside our good friends, Humanize IT. Really excited to talk about QBRs today, to talk about vCISO work during QBRs. We have a really packed show here. For those of you that are joining, or those of you that are, kind of watching on the different platforms, feel free to, pop in and, kind of ask any questions along the way. Try to stump me, right? I love being stumped so that I can learn, right? I don't know, maybe try to stump Adam too. I'll throw that out there. So
Can't be done. My ego's too big.
Awesome. All right, Adam, I know we have this run of show, these questions, this stuff. Set the stage for us, my friend.
Yeah, so I spent a long time in compliance, right? Not just any compliance, but critical infrastructure compliance. And they had a heyday. What was that, 2 weeks ago? In critical infrastructure, we have really tight controls and really strict regulations. So the compliance arena was always somewhere that I felt a close tie to as a CISO. And when I left that world, it was mostly because I was tired of dealing with policy management. It is annoying. It takes up a lot of time, and you couldn't just copy pasta things. You actually had to mean it in critical infrastructure. You had to actually build things that mattered because you were being attacked daily by very capable people.
Yeah.
So the problem here is that back then it was just critical infrastructure was really structured, or banks or things like that, like hospitals. Today we're seeing the bright lines move down like they did in critical infrastructure back in like 2017, where now smaller entities are being required to have compliance. So small businesses, medium-sized businesses. I know my own personal company, Humanize IT, has to go through a SOC audit every year. Otherwise, there are a large number of MSPs who will not do business with us. These winds are shifting, which means who's going to be responsible for this? Who's going to take on the compliance need, or help your small businesses, your medium-sized businesses who are busy as they are, and you're busy? How do we get to that? But what has changed? Why are the lines shifting is my question to Tim. Why are the lines shifting from just big corporate and critical infrastructure to small business?
Well, you make an interesting point about using the word critical infrastructure. I did a little research the other day, and actually, critical infrastructure is way more than you might think as an MSP, right? I think, according to one report from CISA and the OMB, like the organizations that have the data that define these things, there was over, I think it was either 1.2 or 1.5 businesses that are considered critical infrastructure. Generally we think of that word and we think of like, railroads, airline, water, right? Like defense. We think of those things, but actually there's a trickle down effect that applies to a lot more businesses like hospitals and clinics and fire and all of those kinds of things, right? So as I started to dig into that, I was like, critical infrastructure, yes, there's a top level, but there's a whole sub level of businesses that help support critical infrastructure, right?
Yeah.
So you made the comment about SOC 2. I know we talked about this on our podcast the other day, and my thoughts and feelings about SOC 2. While I do believe it is a good thing for people to get any kind of legal attestation they can, that they're actually doing the practices and that those things are scoped appropriately. Um, we are seeing this shift, this third, fourth, and nth party risk, right, coming into supply chain, coming into this critical infrastructure, right? And we like to look at compliance as the referee, right? We talk cybersecurity all the time. It has been the big shift for MSPs from, all the way from like the days of fixing mom's computer to MRR, all the way now, talk cybersecurity. Compliance is the next thing, right? It is the rules and regulations. It is the guidebook or the playbook that you as an MSP can follow. I mean, it literally outlines these are the things you should be doing, right? It
Yep.
gives you that sort of referee to be able to do that work.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but it's the way to make things easy. People are like, oh, well, my client isn't listening to me about doing
Yeah,
multi-factor or securing their server or turning on BitLocker, or they're not listening to me. You're right, they're not, because they have other risks to deal with. Why is
right,
this one so important? And so
right,
compliance comes in and says, hey, you need to do this as a best practice. This is industry standard. If you're not doing this, so it's not just the MSP being a squeaky wheel. It's very powerful entity saying this is bare minimum what you need to be doing, and having that meat behind there, that those teeth behind there of like, if you don't do this, you don't get to do business with your local utilities anymore. You don't get to do
mhm,
business with your hospitals anymore because you
right,
are too much of a risk. Even if you're just a flower shop, you're too much of a risk for us. We'll go to
mhm,
the one who is taking this seriously and willing to
right,
do this. So,
right.
who's the appropriate person to have this conversation with a small business?
Well, it's interesting that you bring it up because Richard here in LinkedIn brings up a really good point about, words and words meaning something, right? As a compliance focused I totally get this. Words mean something, right? And the word critical might ring different, as Richard points out here. But here's the thing: people way smarter than us in the federal government, maybe way smarter than whatever. That's up for debate. People that are not us are actually defining these things, that are actually defining critical infrastructure, defining what is considered critical, right? I mean, I think we could all agree like water, pretty critical, right? Electricity, yeah, probably pretty critical, right? Health organizations and hospitals, probably pretty critical, right? But as you bring that down into the MSP level, is the donut shop critical? Well, I don't know. If I'm a
Yes,
policeman
it
and I eat
is.
my
How
donut,
do you make it
if I
through
eat my
meetings?
donut, if I'm a donut man and I want my Dunkins every morning or my coffee every day, of course it's critical to me. But to Richard's point here, I get it. Like sometimes our clients really struggle to understand where they fit in that entire chain of support, right? Let's pick on the whole CrowdStrike thing for a second, right? How many pizza shops could not keep up with the business, right? Those couple of days. Like, I mean, even our good friends at Huntress actually went out and bought pizzas for people, right?
Yep.
Pizza could be considered critical, right? The little local pizza joint could be considered critical, especially in the time of need like that. So,
Yeah.
totally understand what you're saying, Richard, around critical infrastructure varies. Joff, yes, if I'm saying Joff or Jeff correctly, this will always be here on LinkedIn Live and YouTube and all the things. So, yes, you'll be able to get that there. So, Adam, we tried to like set the stage with the problem, right? We tried to talk about, 10 or 15 or 20 years ago when I started doing this work for the feds, it was federal government said, you will do this thing. If you want to work with us, you will do this thing. But now, as you progress forward, I mean, even cyber insurance is asking, do these basic 7 or 8 things. have an incident response plan, right? Cyber insurance is really driving that. So, yeah. Hey, Bill, good to see you. I don't know what the heck this is, Mr. Adam, but we'll move with that on the news. Did you just post your password on there? Hopefully not.
Oh, it's the link to our
Gotcha.
the way it chopped up the YouTube feed. But if you
Ah,
guys can try that as my
oh.
password, maybe it is it. I don't know.
Hey, Bill. Hey, Bill. Good to see you. Neil, what do we got over here? Off topic. Where did you get your neon sign? We can talk offline. I can actually make a referral, and you can get me $10 for buying one. I'm kidding. I don't care about referral fees, but I will talk to you. Send me a message. So we've recognized that the industry has shifted, that compliance is here, that it's no longer a checkbox exercise, right? And so, us as MSPs, as we start to move forward, right, what do we need to think about as far as delivering these services to our customer, Adam? How do I, as a busy, level 3 technician, or maybe even a TAM or account manager, like, what do I need to do, right? What we know what the problem is. The problem is, well, Adam, tell me what you think the problem is. We'll start there.
Problem is, there's too few people who've actually been through compliance, right? You hear about it, you maybe done a self-assessment at some point, but then you have clients who have absolutely no clue what compliance is. It's just a funny word that hospitals have to deal with and banks have to deal with. And so the problem now is no one knows how to talk about this in an effective manner. And once you get that meaning behind it and the compliance, the actually control family behind it or framework behind it, now you say, oh, this does matter. This is now in my cybersecurity insurance. I can't do this. So what's happening is we are not able to do business unless we're compliant, but no one knows how to jump over that hurdle. And so
Mm,
unless you've worked in a compliance department, unless you've worked with a compliance professional, how do you get that expertise? I mean, you can go to SANS, you can go to like CompTIA and take some classes on it, but that's a whole different ballgame than actually living, eating, and breathing compliance, gathering evidence, applying controls, and negotiating with business owners saying, look, I gotta turn this off. But I really like it. I know you like that, but I have to turn it off. Yes, you're going to have to use an authenticator to get into your favorite thing now. I'm sorry. But if you want to do business with this billion-dollar company, we've got to do this thing. And now it matters.
mhm,
Before you could get
mhm,
away with just ignoring it because it didn't matter. There was no risk to it. It was just this
right,
pie in the sky. But now that money is on the table and the
mhm,
ability to do business is on the table, these small businesses are going to look around and say, how can I get this done? I want to get this done as quickly and painlessly as possible. And they're going to want to hit the lowest bar humanly possible
good.
until they start getting it under the. And Tim, you've been in compliance long enough that you know all these arguments. But now we're going to
Yeah,
start having them, and your clients are going to start looking for who's my expert, who can help me with this. And I
mhm.
tell you what, the
Well,
CPA firms are going to eat this up.
I mean, that's the shift in the industry, right? We talked a little bit about this in the beginning, how we've gone from fixing my mom's, laptop to selling MRR to doing cybersecurity, right? We are, for all intents and purposes, the technical experts. We are well positioned as MSPs to understand some of the technical nuance, right? The challenge that some of us tech geeks have is, how do we explain that in terms that our customers can understand? How do we have that risk conversation using words? You mentioned the word negotiate, right? And our good friend Nat, she's doing a negotiation video over with our friends at Empath. I'll drop that link in the comments later. Like, the art of negotiation for us technical people is really difficult, right? And as you're building out your MSP practices, and as you're delivering these QBRs, these risk business reviews, as you're delivering that, you may consider learning yourself the art of negotiation, or bringing somebody in that has those types of skills that aren't just technical but are, the soft skills, right? That's a whole nother webinar down the road. But today we're talking about quarterly business reviews. Everybody knows the term QBR. My good friend Alex and Marnie used to fight about this all the time because I like to use RBR, or risk business review, right?
Yeah.
Because the days of just telling customers about tickets or telling customers about spams blocked, like, I care about that. That's something that can be like emailed once a month. You want to actually sit down, identify those areas of risk, and have
Yeah.
that risk conversation. And you probably want to be able to do that work at scale, right? You don't want to have to manipulate spreadsheets and Word docs and all that baloney. You want to have something like Humanize IT and our integration with Compliance Scorecard to get the data to actually show here is where your risks lie, right, Adam? You want to talk
Yeah.
a little bit about kind of, we've identified the problem. It's here. It's not going away. It affects pretty much everybody. It's dangerous if you're not doing it, right?
hmm
How do we
Yeah.
solve for that?
Well, so my wife's a pharmacist, right? And when she went through pharmacy school, this has been 13 years ago, they taught her what's referred to as holistic approach, holistic health. So rather than just treating one symptom at a time, there's this idea that you need to look at the whole lifestyle of the patient. What are they doing as a whole? And then fit a regime in that will help fix the problems that they're having as part of a holistic solution, rather than just looking at the heart, just looking at the lungs, just looking at the blood, looking at the meds. So we want to do the same thing in IT. A lot of times we walk in and we just look at assets. Tell me about warranties and tickets. I don't care about everything else. Oh, you're not doing MFA? You should be doing MFA. Whoa, you just jumped in somewhere else. And so you start speaking in these disjointed ways where the client isn't tracking what you're saying. You can track it easily because you're an IT person. All this is in your head. It's all inside that mind map you have. Your client is not on that same page. And so let's say you get a tool like Compliance Scorecard, which best product I've ever worked with on compliance. To put my plug in there. And again, I've done a lot of compliance, CISSP, CISO, the works. I'm published at SANS somewhere. I don't even know if the paper's still viable. Uh, the the thing is, like, working with Compliance Scorecard makes things really easy, but it's just one piece of what you're doing for your client. And so you can show them the risk registers that are in there and identify, hey, these are the things that are going to affect your company. But if you don't look at it as a whole and say, look, this is why MFA is important, because otherwise somebody could spoof your password and get access to all your client data, and you're going to lose all your clients overnight. It happens. Now, if you work with Compliance Scorecard, you've identified all these. Now, how do you fit it into the bigger picture? And so the holistic approach says, look, you've got MFA, you've got two-factor, you've got an authentication control over here that you need to deal with, but you've also got physical controls. You got things like, how are you getting into the building? Are you leaving the key? Are you just using a physical key? Are you using a fob? Do you have camera systems? And then, yeah, there you go. And then on top of that, like, how are you spending money on servers, on assets? How are you spending money to get an edge when you're selling hot dogs out in the park?
Yep.
All of these things taken together. Now, where does that MFA fall? Where does that control family fall? Where are my big things? So when you're doing a risk register, it's really important to understand how your client does business, so you can help them understand where this risk fits in their holistic business approach. Then they'll start listening to you, but you have to listen a lot first.
You do. So Nate brings up a great question, right? The cost, right? Justifying the cost, right? And so, that kind of ties right into what you're saying, Adam, around cost, right? So by going through these exercises, by going through these gap analysis, by putting these things, in front of your customer, at least from a technical perspective, right? You're going to actually potentially save cost, because when the thing happens, now you can show that you've done your due care, your due diligence. Like, nobody's ever compliant on day one, and nobody is ever compliant every day going forward, right? It is an ongoing process, right? And so, being able to have the conversation, being able to show the customer, hey, we asked you to enable 2FA. We consulted with you to have backups. We came to you and suggested these are the areas based on our conversations that we had. Now you have a business choice to make, Mr. Business or Mrs. Business Owner. You can mitigate that risk, which is what we really want, right? We want them to fix their things and probably get the project work out of it as an MSP, right? But you mentioned the word risk register, right? Now, a lot of people might not necessarily know what that means. Think of it as an Amazon shopping cart. Think of it as I have identified gaps within the business. I, as the technical professional, have identified broken stuff, right? And I have built an Amazon shopping cart. And I have now given my customer the opportunity to decide what they want to do. Do you want to fix that? Do you want to defer that? Do you want to ignore that? And so by using an risk register shopping cart and presenting that to your customer and allow them to make their own business decisions. Yes, you can do that work in compliance scorecard. And yes, you should be able to present that work over in Humanize IT during your QBR and vCISO conversation. But what that does for both you and your customer is it builds that defensibility. Hey, we kept telling them and they kept saying no. Or hey, we told them or we asked them and they decided to fix it. Yes, because that's what we really want, is for them to understand their risks and mitigate their risks, right? We'll pick on the donut shop. Hey, donut shop only has one supplier of eggs, and the chicken farm gets wiped out in a hurricane, whatever. I don't know. That's probably a really bad analogy given the recent hurricane. But now I have no eggs to make my donuts.
Okay, that's an area of risk.
That's an area of risk, right? Maybe they should have two chicken suppliers, right? That's the idea, is having that conversation, understanding what makes them money, finding the things in there that are areas of risk. And then let them figure out what they want to do, right? Let them figure out and consult with them. I want to circle back here real quick.
Well, on top of that, what you just said, and then we'll circle back, is that hurricane, the chicken and egg thing. What if you were the only coffee shop open during the CrowdStrike outage?
Yeah.
How much money is that worth to you? Or what if you had a response to get your kiosk back up within 30 minutes of this massive outage? We don't know what the next one's going to be. It's going to happen again. Any security person worth their salt can say, it's not an if, it's when. Can you recover? And so we can help you with that. That risk register, your kiosk is locked up because bad antivirus, bad software update, whatever. It can be anything.
Right.
Here's our workaround. When that happens, do this and you'll be up in 20 minutes. Or 5 minutes even. And so you can put that out there and say, how much is that worth to you? What is it worth to you to be the only coffee shop open? Where you put a banner outside, not affected, come get your coffee here. That suddenly becomes, is it now worth the extra $2,000 to have a compliance audit?
Right. So this comes up a lot. How do you justify the cost, right? And I think Adam just touched on that, which is, how do you justify not doing it? Right? If you look at, and I hate to keep picking on CrowdStrike, Microsoft, and Delta.
It's the hot topic right now.
Right. But if you look at what's going on over there, now you have everybody blaming everybody and lawsuits and $500 million of revenue and yada, 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 yada. Like, Southwest, sure, they're running, I don't know, Windows 3.1, weren't affected, right? So that's a whole different conversation. But the point is, they weren't able to determine, or maybe they did and chose not to, again, risk register.
Yep.
They found like, hey, we don't have a disaster recovery and business continuity plan. Or maybe they did and it wasn't updated or regularly reviewed, i.e. complianced, right? Governed, right? The G part of GRC, right? Maybe they had a DR plan or a backup and disaster recovery plan. But what we have seen is the things get written once, they grab some stupid sans template, threw it on a shelf, and forgot about it. Well, now, if you've noticed, both NIST and CIS now have this govern function, right? This look at stuff on a regular cadence,
Yeah.
test stuff on a regular cadence, continuous compliance monitoring.
Yep.
And you, as an MSP, providing that service and reporting on it during your quarterly business or risk business reviews on a cadence that you define with your customer.
Yeah, and I think it was mentioned earlier. You have to scroll up there to find it, where they said quarterly is not enough to talk about compliance, and you are correct. What we're trying to do is create bigger pictures. So cadence is an important word to us at Humanize IT. What are you doing on a weekly basis? What are you doing on a monthly basis? And what are you doing on a quarterly basis? What are you doing on an annual basis? These are things that you need to know. You don't need to talk about everything on a weekly basis. You don't need to talk about everything at a QBR. People try to shove so much into QBRs that the point of them has been lost. If you're talking about warranties and asset management during a QBR, that's not a QBR. That's a technical review. And they're very important. That's an operational discussion. But you're not leaving any room to have a risk discussion or a finance discussion, which is what belongs in a QBR. These high level items like, hey, over this last quarter, we have discovered these things in the risk register. As the compliance team met on a weekly basis or on a monthly basis, trying to get you your compliance framework adopted, we discovered these things. We need the high level team to adopt this. Now, what do you guys think about these risks? Can you just give us some feedback? And that's part of your QBR methodology. And I'm going to show you what that looks like here. I'm going to do a shameless plug for my own software. Drink your own Kool-Aid. How I do a QBR with clients that matters and shows them that big picture. Because sometimes your client doesn't want to buy into compliance, but you can have a little nub in there that says you're 0% compliant on SOC 2. And it reminds them every quarter they are 0% on framework of choice. And they're like, well, crap, that's really starting to bug me. You know, it take the third or fourth time doing a QBR where it says 0 and they've got red lines there on their assets. And eventually they're like, okay, what do we have to do to get at least bare minimum here? And
nothing speaks volume. Nothing speaks volume like a red scorecard.
Yeah, red.
Hence the name Compliance Scorecard.
There you go.
Right? We just got our new T-shirts today. I'm pretty excited. They're really comfortable. Anyways, so kind of let's summarize here. We've got a lot of great comments coming in. I just posted we can't keep up with them, so keep them coming. But we're going to try to address them as they're coming in. Love the fact that Nathaniel Allen. I'm going to mess up that other name, so I'm not even going to try to say it. But keep up those comments. Both Adam and I are available on LinkedIn DM if you had more specific stuff for us to help. So we talked about the problem. Compliance is here. It's not going away. Compliance is not a checkbox exercise anymore. It is an ongoing thing, right? We talked a little bit about the solution, about having the risk conversation with your customer, hearing and listening, that 80-20 rule, let them talk 80% of the time in that kind of risk conversation. We talked a little bit about, reds on scorecards, help you, kind of with that pricing conversation, right? We mentioned, or I might have mentioned that, how can you afford not to do it, right? And so do we have, let me just third-party vendor due diligence. That's another webinar in and of itself, Nathaniel. I'll give you my opinions about that at some point. So,
speaking of cadence, sometimes you dive into things. Sometimes you say, look, I need more time to discuss this with you. I give you Tim Golden.
One of the things that we did at our MSP was to conduct weekly L10 style meetings with either one or two of the right people, right? So we had weekly cadence meetings. They were 30 to 45 minutes. They were well structured, right? What's going well, what's not. L10 style. Go Google L10, you'll figure it out. And then that set the pace. And not only did it set the pace, but it also made us more sticky with our customer, right?
Mhm.
They keep paying us, but we don't talk to them. And, when it comes time for annual renewal, they're like, what have you done for me? I throw money at you every month, but you never talk to me. You know, defining a cadence, and part of the onboarding that we did as an MSP was ask them who is accountable and responsible and given the authority. Doesn't have to be the CEO. It could just be Sally's secretary or Harry in HR, that person. Once you've determined that person, then you determine, how do I like to communicate with that person and how frequently should I communicate with that person, right? It's all about setting the expectation with the customer, whether it is somebody new that you're bringing in or an existing conversation or existing client. Finding the human that has the authority, responsibility, and pieces, setting a cadence that works for both of you, and then ongoing do the work. And then that once a quarter, you can show that progress over time, right? You can have that bigger technology or quarterly or risk review with the higher ups. Hey, we did work and this is what we did. And by the way, you still have a 0 on SOC 2, so we should probably look at that.
Yeah. So let me flip over. Like, security does not happen in a vacuum, and I want to get a little bit lower level here. So I'm going to share my screen just for like 5 minutes. Do a
Yeah,
shameless
yeah.
plug.
No, go ahead. Pull
You
that
can
up.
do, and just so you guys know, you can do this with a piece of paper. I mean, you can do it with a number two. Well, you always joke that our software can be done with a number 2 pencil and a Big Chief notebook, right?
Yeah.
So over here, this is our platform, Humanity. I've got Acme Core. I pulled in my projects from my PSA. Here's things we're working on. We're working on Windows 7 end of life. I should probably update to Windows 10 end of life just for.
Maybe make this bigger so everybody can see.
Yeah, for the old people like Richard. Anyways, we have these things that we're working on, but then as we scroll down and we have in this meeting, we're discussing what we've done and where we're going. We can now come down and say, oh, look, according to Compliance Scorecard, hey, Tim, what's going on here with the SOC 2 assessment?
Mm-hmm. Well,
Can you give me a breakdown? This is coming right from your tool.
Yeah, it's super tiny on my screen. But what I can see here is that, you've done half of the work. You have a 50% score, right? You've done, it's really hard for me to see on the screen, tiny as it is.
Let me do it. I can do it.
Oh, there we go. Yeah. So when we're looking at SOC 2 and part of our secret sauce, well, it's not secret, right? We throw it out there. We've broken compliance down into 4 simple steps. Right? Alignment, authorization, adoption, and assessment. It's pretty darn easy, right? It doesn't have to be hard. Is a thing aligned to a thing? So in this case, is the company aligning to SOC 2? Great. Us as MSPs, it's not our stuff, it's our customers. They need to authorize it. They need to approve it. They need to do the work. We need to have the conversation, but it's their stuff. They need to authorize it.
Correct.
Right? And then, what good's all this work if you don't have end user buy-in? If they haven't adopted these things, right? If they haven't made it part of their corporate culture. And lastly, things that need to be on a regular assessment cadence. So what I see here is that, you're halfway done. You've done the alignment piece. You've kind of pulled the things together and said, here's how we are aligned to stuff, right? And, we've set that review cadence, that assessment cadence. I mean, we still have to get them authorized and end users adopted. But moving on over to the business risk, that's doing an assessment. Us as MSPs, we've done an assessment, whether it's business risk, whether it's CMMC, FTC, HIPAA, mouthful of acronyms. We've done an assessment and we've seen the at risk, needs attention, looks great, doesn't look great. We've identified the gaps. That is what the business risk assessment there, that just happens to be one of our predefined assessment templates. We have all kinds of other assessment templates, but yeah. Further on down the line, asset. Where's Matt Lee? What's an asset? Right. So yeah, just about every framework has some kind of asset management component. And us as MSPs, we may have multiple sources of truth. A device, a laptop, a phone, or a laptop could or could not be in many different locations. But they're not our assets. They're our customers. They're not our humans. They're our customers, right? And having this asset list across multiple different categories, by the way, you can now govern that on a regular basis, right? You can now involve your customer to have them authorize, yeah, those are our humans. Nope, that's not my computer. Authorize those particular assets across multiple different categories, right? As you can see, Adam hasn't tied in the human integration yet into Compliance Scorecard because it says none, but he has done hardware and software, so that's a great start. We have multiple integrations to kind of prove this stuff through API and the tools that your MSP already uses. But let's back up. What am I looking at here? So I'm I'm the MSP. No, Adam, you tell me what I'm looking at.
Yeah, so you're looking at the MSP. What?
What is this thing?
Well, this is a QBR. This is a persona. I have lined up the things that I want to talk to the client about, right? So it's all modular. So I brought in the SOC 2 compliance because I really am trying to push SOC 2 for them. I'm really trying to push these projects that they need to be working on. But as a holistic approach goes, I need to show them how this is all going to work in here with the things we've recommended to them. So here's some of the SOC, or here's some of the access controls we need to do. And this is part of it. And then there's our pandemic readiness. That was a risk we identified in the risk register. Here's what's going to cost to do that. And if we need to break it out, we can. We're showing them as a bigger picture. We're not just working on compliance. We're not just working on asset management. We're working on everything at once at this high 50,000 foot view. That's what a QBR should be, a 50,000 foot view. And then what you need to do is down here, you see like your open tickets, your issues, but down here, you're going to have meet with the client to do a deep dive on a report for the compliance scorecard. Let's dive into this stuff that we had up here and why we're still red on these elements and what we need to talk about. As Tim keeps saying in this discussion, that's a whole other discussion. Don't try to squeeze everything into one meeting out of fear that your client won't meet with you again. Put things in here that the executives can say, oh, you know what? For the human element of this, I need to get you with Sandy in HR so that she can help you with the policies and stuff that's going on there. Let's schedule a meeting with her. Awesome. Get that going right now.
I was going to say, or with our integration with M365, you can just do it automatically.
There you go. Automatically. And so you get that on the calendar. Put that in place. This is what your QBR is for, lining up the next quarter of activities. You can see over here, like all this is an L10, people. You know, you're just going through and discussing what's coming up, where do we need to go, who's the key takeaways, who's doing what, and schedule those meetings so you can deep dive. Now your client feels heard. And it's all part of this bigger one. If you want to put a broad budget here for the holistic budget and a security budget and an operational budget, feel free. I will generate as many widgets in here as you want to have. And that is how you fall forward. Some of the more mature MSPs actually have a separate service board in ConnectWise or their PSA just for compliance issues. Put that in here, but don't deep dive on it here. Use the compliance scorecard tool to deep dive into what needs to be done, what risks need to be registered, so the client can say, you know what, I don't want to take care of that. Cool. I'm going to go into that risk register and say, client has accepted the risk. And we'll discuss that next year. And they get to be reminded every year of what they did. So,
go ahead.
I almost canceled out of the studio. I was trying to stop screen sharing. I give you a big old warning. So the goal is when you're talking to the client about risk, when you're talking to them about asset management or things like that, it needs to happen in a holistic approach. If you need to talk about Microsoft licensing, that needs to be a separate discussion. If you need to talk about compliance, that needs to be many discussions, probably on a weekly cadence until you get a handle on it. And so these are things that you get to talk about. So when your client isn't listening to you, you say, my client doesn't listen to me on risk management. It's probably because you're throwing too much at them and they don't get it. But if you do it in this top-down approach where you say, hey, look, this is where we are at a high level on everything we're working on. Let's
Right.
move down. So then next time you have a QBR and you have those risks up there saying, we don't have a way to restore your kiosks in under 2 hours. And the CrowdStrike issue hits, then you have your QBR and they're like, okay, we want to take that seriously now. It's $2,400 to mitigate that, right? Yes, let's pull that trigger now because I never want to go through that again. But it was on your QBR. Your regular meeting had that on there so that when it's a hot topic for them, when it's top of mind for them, it's right in front of them on their audit, ready to go. That's what a holistic approach is. And then you move on to how do we get better computers for the admin assistants? How do we, find a better tablet for home use? All those things happen in the same conversation, but they happen at a high level.
Exactly. And so, being able to have a dashboard, much like Compliance Scorecard and Humanize IT, to be able to have that risk conversation with your customer, to be able to present to them, top-down approach, the weekly work, the monthly work, the stuff you're doing on an ongoing basis sums up into this report, sums up into these things where now you can actually sit with your customer and show them how you are progressing, how you are actually justifying your own monthly recurring revenue and your own cost to them, how you're protecting and defending their business, right? You have identified those crown jewels, you've identified those areas of risk, and now you're just working alongside them, iterating and getting better over time. Right.
Yeah.
And being able to use these reports and these tools to have that conversation.
And remember, your client is going to be in the same place that you are. You can help bring them up to speed. But if you spend time listening to them, what their concerns are, you can say, oh, we identified a risk there 6 months ago. Let's talk about that now. It's almost like parenting, right? You're sitting there and your kid isn't ready to talk about how to do a budget. They just want to spend money and do what they want to do. Then they get that first financial stress. You're like, I really should be paying attention to this. I keep running out of money.
I want to buy the Xbox, but I blew all my money on candy and Coke. Pepsi, sorry.
What kind of family do you have?
Mountain Dew.
It was that's the idea though. Like your client does the same thing. They blow all their money on whatever around the office because they think that's important at the time. Marketing, sales. And they are important because they're trying to generate revenue. But then all of a sudden they're like, oh crap, I need to make sure we need to be SOC 2 compliant. We need to be HIPAA compliant, whatever, figure control family. And now it's like, oh, that's going to cost like $20,000 to get there because we have to put a whole bunch of controls in and then we also have to audit. So, but having those on the table, on your QBR, on your roadmap, where it's kind of broken up, like, look, this isn't as bad as you think. We can get started on this now and we can piece it together. And compliance scorecard tools, compliance as a service. So I see that you're asking that question, what's the best tool for this? That there's not just one tool for this because you're having multiple conversations. That's why we bring in this particular webinar. And so we need to have a way of talking to our clients holistically, Humanize IT, and then deep diving on things that matter, compliance scorecard, so that you don't miss things. If you use a tool that says, oh, we also do compliance, and we happen to have a tool that, no, stop right there. As somebody who spent a lot of time doing compliance, you do not want a bolt-on product. You want somebody who lives, eats, and breathes this because it changes every year, if not quicker. And you need somebody who's on top of that. Otherwise, guess who gets holding the bill when you tell your client you're helping them with compliance and you missed the new control that came out for PCI or whatever. Don't get left behind. Your clients need to be aware of this stuff, but you can be the subject matter expert. Get a tool like Compliance Scorecard, integrate it into your client framework so that your clients are constantly reminded of what's going on. Where are they going? What's the big picture you're trying to paint for them? And as well, it
Right.
helps you engineers to put things into context too. Okay, would you rather them do MFA, or would you rather them move that server to the cloud this year because they don't have infinite money?
Right.
Which one's the priority? And you get to help have that conversation. It's not your decision, it's the client's decision. They've
I
only
love
got so
that.
much money.
That
But if
is
you
what we
can,
say all the time. It is your customer's decision, right?
yep,
And Adam, I want to circle back to what you did in this conversation 10 or 15 minutes ago. You're talking about healthcare and heart surgery and blah, 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 blah. Like, what you did is you related the conversation to a particular, genre, right? So I'm going to walk through that real quickly, right? We always hear HIPAA customers don't care about HIPAA. They don't want to pay for it, blah, 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 right? Well, here's a way you could approach that with healthcare organizations. You could approach that with, hey, there's something wrong with my leg. Can you just give me a pill to fix it? No, the doctor, no. We have to, x-ray your leg, and we have to do all the things. We have to assess your leg to
mhm,
determine what's wrong. And then we can develop a program for you to be able to go to physical therapy and do the things every day to get your leg better. You see what I did there? I related that conversation, just like Adam did a few minutes ago, back to the business terms that they can understand.
yep,
Mr. Healthcare Organization, I know you probably don't want to spend the money. I get it. But we should at least do an annual security risk assessment to understand what part of your leg hurts and why it hurts. And from there, we can decide to do physical therapy or MRR under our MSP services, right? What we just did here was we related the conversation back to the business owner in terms that they understood, right? That's how you get a seat at the table. That's how you have the conversation. And I get it. It's hard. It's not my nature to sit down and try to figure out. I'm a geek. I've been writing code for 30 years. I want to push. But I had to make that fundamental shift as an MSP in front of the customer to
yeah.
talk to them in words they understood.
Yeah, and that's that relational aspect. Relationships matter. If you think your client isn't listening to you, I see this on Reddit. I see it on in the forums on Facebook all the time. My client won't listen to my recommendations. 99% of the time when I'm consulting with somebody, it's because the client wasn't being listened to.
Right.
That you didn't understand where their heart is, what they value, what their risk is. They have a whole bunch of things they're dealing with. They're dealing with employees quitting. They're dealing with new hires. They're dealing with fluctuating markets. They're dealing with politics that are changing legislation that making it harder or easier to do their jobs that they have to keep on top of. And then on top of all that, you're demanding they behave one way. And they're like,
Love this.
I can't do all that.
I want to put up Zig's comment here, Skip's comment, right? So we see this all the time, right? Let me tell you something. Go do a Google search and search for CNBC medical records. And what you'll find is, Adam, let me ask you this before I even give the reveal this. How much do you think a credit card number, name, address, city, state, zip is worth on the dark web right now?
I don't know, like $1.25. I don't know.
Yeah. How much do you think a medical record is worth on the dark web right now?
Ooh,
$80.
I say
Anywhere
more.
between $60 and $80 per record, according to CNBC.
Okay.
Now you can go get the exact number, go Google it. Don't quote me on. Tim said 80. Well, and the article said 60. Go Google it. You'll figure it out. The point that I'm trying to make, Skip, is while they might not care, the hackers do.
Yes.
Because those records are extremely valuable. And all a hacker needs to do is to bypass one or two kind of things, indicators of compromise, no 2FA, and poof, they're in. And now those records are out on the internet for sale, and you are maybe out of business. I don't know. But
yeah. Breaches are hard. And then let's say you have a breach, been through this. And now you have to hire a PR person. It's one of the top
Mhm.
things to do when you've been breached. Hire PR. This needs to be mitigated in the public's eye now. That's like your
Mhm.
number one thing, like if you want to continue doing business. And so when it comes down to these relatable analogies, one of the things we talk about in our coaching program is that when you start sharing something like MFA, don't sell MFA. Sell sell the ability to keep your records private. And talk about how it's $80. You have 10,000 records there. How much is that worth to your client, to a hacker? How bad do they want to get in there? How, and I guarantee you there are teams out there that target your CFOs and your CEOs and watch them. Wait for them to get on planes. They know their conference schedules. It's creepy. I've watched it. It is creepy. Now,
It is.
how much is that worth to this small business if they're holding just 1,000 records? That's $80,000. Is it $80,000? Is it $800,000? Is it $8 million? That's where you can assign risk and you can scare them, but don't use scare tactics. Use relatability. Change
Relatability.
your project names from firewall to keep out bad guys.
Yeah.
Change your MFA rule to
or like that hackers care, right? Change the vernacular, right? I think, and Dean brought up a really good comment here, and I didn't mean to interrupt you, Adam. I'm sorry, but I
no,
get
you're
really
good.
passionate. I get really
We're
passionate.
talking to people who are passionate here.
So I love the relatability, right? As Jeff brings up, and Jeff, I got it right this time. I love the relatability, right? Talk in terms they understand, and I learned that lesson hard, but early, right? When I walked into the enterprise organization and I started turning everything off and I started disabling stuff and I removed admin rights and I became Mr. No, Big Bad Tim. And it took years for me to get that Big Bad Tim persona moved into, oh, that's a really good idea. We should do that. Because I had to pivot and start with the why conversation and relate that why conversation to the business outcomes, right? This whole session has been about QBRs and vCISO, right? And being our technical expertise. Stop talking temp.
Stop saying firewall. If you say firewall, you should be fired, is our catchphrase at Humanize IT.
I love that. That's new.
I'll tell you, Tim, my tip for everybody listening, if you want to have great security conversations, this goes back to something Tim mentioned earlier. He didn't even know he was doing it. The best thing to do, bring a box of donuts and just sit there and wait for people to come to you.
Yeah.
And make it the good rolls too. You know where the good rolls are in your town. Make it those. Don't make it, the daily donuts from, wherever. Make it the good rolls and just sit there and like everybody knows when Jeff shows up or when Dean shows up that, oh, it's he's bringing rolls. And, I just chit chat and they love it. And I got to know people in my organization. I got to be known as Fridays with Adam. I would walk around the organization and I would bring an entire box of high quality donuts to the department. And I would just sit there and chit chat about what's going on, learn about their day, learn about what they're doing on a daily activities. I built a relationship. I didn't just come in there firing away saying, you guys need to be doing this better. No, I built a relationship. And then they started listening to me. They started asking me, what do you actually do? I'm like, well, my big problem right now is I really need to get people to start locking their computers when they walk away. We're going to make a game of it later, but that's just something I'd really want to do. And they would tell me about like, well, I don't lock my computer because I just go away and I come back and it takes all this effort to get back in. And so I can see it from where I am. I'm like, okay, cool. I'm learning about them. And because that relationship is there, I'm able to sell them like on, oh, well, what if I made it through of like, as long as you're within I adjust the policy. It says, as long as you're within eye distance of your computer, you can walk away from it. Like what if we work the policy to help them? Then they see that I'm working with them. So then when I lock something down, it's actually important to me, like MFA, you will use MFA. They're like, oh, well, Adam worked with me on that last thing. And you've put some chips in their pile. Now you're taking some chips out. And that's how relationships work and they matter. And I say this all the time. If your client isn't listening to you, it's because you're not listening to them. This goes universally for all relationships.
Right.
And trust me, I
Yeah.
talk a lot.
I don't know whether it's you or me. That would be a good conversation, is to figure out who talks more, Tim or Adam.
I think my Fathom note taker tells you like the percentage of talking when I'm in a meeting, and then me, I'm always like 81%.
It is certain. It is so. And all right. So you went there, right? So we all use these note taker apps, these things. I track the 80-20 rule, right? I track it for me. I track it for our staff. I track it for what we do. And the 80-20 rule is they need to be talking 80% of the time.
Yes.
Right. And we track that. It's a KPI for us, right? We keep track of that because we want to learn and hear about their struggles. We want to be able to pinpoint areas where we can help and find risk and relate to them. And so, yeah, you brought it up. We do that. We track that as a KPI, 80-20 rule. And I have a thing right above my monitor that a good friend of ours, Kyle Christensen's, gave me the acronym WAIT. Why am I talking? It's literally right there. Here I am talking about why am I talking. Right. But yeah, that having that relational conversation. So
I had a season who had a stop button on. He had a stop sticker that he had on his notebook. That was a CISO of a major corporation. No, it was just a sticker that he had on every binder. Every time you open up his notebook, there it was. Stop.
Yeah, I had to do that when we were physically in the office years ago in the beginning. Right on my door, I had a little sign that said, "Shut up." Because people would come and they would stand in my doorway and they would bark at me, "Tim, you disabled," and I'd be like, "I'm so sorry. Let me help you with that."
Yeah.
Anyways, we're coming down to the last 3 or 4 minutes here. I know when I like to do these live streams, I like to leave the audience with one key takeaway. So, Adam, I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. I'm going to pull you up full screen. If you had one key takeaway from today's session, what would it be and why? And hold on, let me make you. There we go.
I'm gonna throw this out there, and like Skip's last comment with the hurricanes. Right there. Do you want to help your client with UPS's 3-phase power, or say manage the hurricanes? Which one is your client going to buy in more on? You can talk all day about these assets, about their warranties and everything, or you can say manage the hurricanes. It's just like the car dealer saying, "Here's all the parts of this engine. Here's the fuel company." No, or do you want to look sexy? That emotional aspect, that relational aspect. You are now talking to me about something I care about. I care about hurricanes. I care about them not being a problem. That's the key thing that compliance will help you with. And if you start with a QBR and a compliance in there, you're going to see that holistic picture, and you're going to be able to show them why they need to care, because you're going to start relating to them.
Love that. Love that. It goes right back to relating to the business, right? I love manage the hurricane, right? Manage the chicken farm, right? We talked about that earlier, right? So I don't know. For me, I think one of my key takeaways is don't be afraid of compliance, right? We hear that a lot. We hear, "I don't know where to start. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go. I don't want to get it wrong." Tell you what, by not doing it, you're already getting it wrong, right? By not having the conversation with your customer as an MSP, your competitors will, right? So you hear me say this very frequently, which is start someplace, do something, start now, right? Which means do this work on yourself. Eat your own dog food, drink your own champagne, whatever acronym you like to use around that, right? I don't care if you do that work in spreadsheets and pen and paper and tablets. I mean, obviously you can do it at scale with Compliance Scorecard and Humanize IT, but start someplace, do something. Yeah. Pick a framework and go, right?
Pick
and
one.
Do that on yourself, and you can learn on yourself. You don't have to be afraid of making a mistake on yourself. Or you can join our peer group where we can help teach you this stuff too.
Yes. And get online, get some education. Tim's got some great peer groups. Those are gold, guys. Gold. Tim, cool. Anyway, I can't help it. I'm a dad. Puns are there. But the idea is that you need to educate yourself. You need to get ahead of this. Otherwise, somebody else will beat you to the punch. Establish yourself as the SME in this area for your clients. They'll tell their friends, oh, hey, Bob helped me through this. Richard helped me through this. Talk to them first, and they'll help you with this compliance need you have. How do they do it? They've got a set of tools.
Awesome.
Set yourself up today.
And I just saw this here real quick. The peer group. You can get all of that information at compliancescorecard.com. Sign up right online. Last shameless plug. We are at the top of the hour. Everybody, thank you so much. Lots of great comments. Adam and I will follow up on LinkedIn after on all the comments that I have missed, been trying to keep up on.
There's a ton of them.
Have a great week, everybody. You can find us on LinkedIn, YouTube. Do the things, the likes, the shares, spread the word. But Tim Golden, Compliance Scorecard. See y'all.
Thank you.
Subscribe now.